Welcome to Theory of Music, Grade 1, Lesson 2 with Franz Devantier. In this lesson, we will be looking at musical pitch and musical notes. Now, pitch refers to how low or how high the notes are. On the guitar, the low notes are towards the top of the guitar, and that's where the thick strings are, the strings that are covered in metal on the classical guitar. And the high notes are towards the bottom of the guitar, or the thin nylon strings towards the bottom of the guitar. On the piano keyboard, the low notes are on the left-hand side of the keyboard, and the high notes are on the right-hand side of the keyboard. Notes written on the staff obviously being written on paper. The staff consists of 5 lines. Now, low notes are written towards the bottom of the staff, and the high notes are written towards the top of the staff. Here is an example of a low note and a high note on the 5-line staff. Notice that notes can be on a line or between the lines or in a space. On the left, we have a low note at the bottom of the staff, and on the right, we have a high note at the top of the staff, and it's in between the lines or it's on a space, in a space. On the guitar, you can write music on the staff or on a tablature, T-A-B. Sometimes the music on the staff is written above the tablature so that you can see them both. This is something that is peculiar to the guitar. Tablature. Each line represents a string on the guitar. If you look at the diagram below, we'll see from the bottom we have E, A, D, G, B, E. Now the low string in tablature is written at the bottom, and the high string is written at the top. Now that corresponds to the musical notation, where the low notes are also written at the bottom and the high notes are written at the top. And remember that the actual guitar, it's switched the other way around. The low notes are at the top and the high notes are at the bottom. So you just need to remember that switch around that happens. The numbers on the strings represent the frets that are played to create a note. Tablature is absolutely great, but there are limitations with tablature. So we will learn the conventional music notation first and add the tablature later. Now, what are these notes that I keep talking about? They are certainly not yellow sticky notes. So here we have some notes. Now the note in the top left-hand side is represented by a circle, and that is called a whole note. And we see that one whole note is equal to 1 half note plus 1 half note. Now a half note is written by the same circle as with the whole note, except it has a stem going down the left-hand side of the note. If the stem was going up, it would have been on the right-hand side of the note. So remember, the stems always are attached to the left-hand side of the note if they're going down. 1 whole note equals 1 half note plus 1 half note. And there's a diagram below. You see at the top there's a whole note, and underneath that 2 half notes. Now imagine with that top note, if we were singing that whole note, it's a long note, and the bass drum played 2 beats on the drum while we sang that whole note. Here's a bass drum, for example. Then the bass drum would have played half notes, and we would have sang a whole note. Now let's have a look at half notes. Now there's our half note on the left-hand side. We see it's a circle with the stem going down on the left-hand side. A half note is equal to 1 quarter note plus 1 quarter note. Now, if you look at the difference, It's also, a quarter note's also a circle, and it's got a stem going down, but the circle is colored in. So it's sometimes just referred to as a dot. So it's a dot or a colored in circle with the stem going down on the left-hand side, and that is called a quarter note. So a half note is equal to 2 quarter notes. Now, obviously, if you think about the word quarter notes, there's 4 quarters in a whole. So that means there's 4 quarter notes in a whole note, and there's 2 quarter notes in one half note. Now, if you look at the diagram at the bottom, you see there's a half note, and underneath it are 2 quarter notes. So imagine that while we were singing this half note, a tenor drum played 2 beats on the tenor drum in quarter notes. And here's a nice picture of a tenor drum. So a tenor drum is halfway between a bass drum and a side drum. Now let's look at this quarter note a little bit more. So if we look at the quarter note, we see that it's equal to 1/8 note plus 1/8 note. So 2/8 notes is equal to 1 quarter note. Now, just the name of the note, 8th note, means there's 8 of these notes in a whole note. But in a quarter note, there's 2 of them. And of course, in a half note, there would be 4 of them. And if you look at the illustration below, there is a quarter note, and underneath it are 2 8th notes. But how do you know that it's an 8th note? It's got something extra added to it. Now, if you look carefully, you'll see it's the dot or the colored in circle. There's the stem going down on the left-hand side, and then it's also got a little flag. The flag is more or less at 45 degrees going up again. So there's the flag. So it's a note, colored in note, stem, and flag, and that's how we represent an 8th note. So 1 quarter note is equal to 2 8th notes. Now, if you were singing that quarter note or playing that quarter note on your instrument, and while you were playing it, the side drum played 2 quick 8th notes. And here's a picture of a side drum. So what would happen is when you finished singing your quarter note, the side drum would have also finished playing the 2 8th notes. Now here's the whole picture that we've spoken about all together. And if you look down the left-hand side, we see there's the whole note, half note, quarter note, and 8th note. Now you see the whole note is just a circle. The half note is also just a circle, but with a stem on the left-hand side. The quarter notes are also just circles, but they're colored in. So they're colored in circles or dots with the stem going down on the left-hand side. And the 8th notes are circles colored in, or a dot, you could say, with the stem going down, but with the added flag. So that's how we know it's a 8th note. Now, of course, if you look at the top, you can see there's 1 whole note, there's 2 half notes, there's 4 quarter notes, and there's 8 8th notes. So that's also very logical. It actually works out very nicely. But what we can also see from this diagram is that a whole note has got 2 half notes, a half note has got 2 quarter notes, and each quarter note has got 2 8th notes behind it. So it divides binary in a way. It just gets twice as small each time. But now the interesting thing is, you may notice on the right-hand side of this illustration, there are different names. So a whole note is also known as a semi-breve. A half note is also known as a minim. Quarter note is also known as a crotchet. And an 8th note is also known as a quaver. Now you might say to me, if that whole note is a semi-breve, what is a breve? Well, the answer to that is a breve is equivalent to a double whole note. Okay, we don't have double whole notes or breves at this point in time, we've just focused on the 4 main notes that you're going to be working with. Keep in mind there's many, many more notes than just these 4 types of notes, but these are the core, so we're just going to work with the core to start with. Now, you need to know both names like whole note and semi-breve, half note, minim, and so on, because they're completely interchangeable, and you'll get into situations where one person talks about quarter notes and the next person talks about crotchets, and without skipping a beat, you need to know exactly what it means. And the way to memorize this is to just say to yourself, a semi-breve is equal to a whole note. A minim is equal to a half note. A crotchet is equal to a quarter note. A quaver is equal to an eighth note. And then you'll have that whole relationship worked out perfectly. Now, in the United States of America and Canada, they mainly use whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and eighth notes. And in the United Kingdom and South Africa, we like to use the semi-breve, minim, crotchet, and quaver. And in different English-speaking parts of the world, you'll find that it's actually split up even further. Some people will use whole notes and half notes, and some people will use semi-breves and minims. So you need to absolutely know both of them. So just spend some time practicing this, and just so that you can be able to know if somebody says that's a quarter note, you know what it is. Or if they say it's 3 crotchets, okay, you know what a crotchet is, it's a quarter note. So in other words, it's 3 quarter notes. So you definitely need to be familiar with both methods of naming notes. In South Africa, for example, that's where I live, you'll find one musician will be speaking about half notes and quarter notes. And you need to adapt the way you speak with that person to half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, whole notes. And then the very next person you speak to, the very next musician, will be speaking about minims and crotchets, quavers and semi-breves. And you need to adapt straight away, because some of them won't be able to switch between the two. So as a good theoretical musician, start off by memorizing both methods so that you can actually use both methods successfully. I'll just go over that again. Just say to yourself, a semi-breve is a whole note. A minim is a half note. A crotchet is a quarter note. A quaver is an eighth note. Just memorize that and you'll be okay. Thank you for joining me for Grade 1, Lesson 2 of Theory of Music. In this lesson, we have covered the pitch of notes and looked at musical notes. These lessons were presented in the context of the guitar, as well as in the traditional keyboard context. In Lesson 3, we will explore the musical staff and how to put notes on it. See you in Lesson 3.